After a whole year of waiting for a new season of Game of Thrones, the final season is almost upon us. The anticipation is real. So, without further ado, possible spoilers ahead, I'm your host, the OG Fat Ninja himself, Raging Antibody, and this is 12 predictions for the final season of Game of Thrones. Number 12, The Clegane Bowl. There is absolutely no real evidence to support this except for wishful thinking, but I am totally predicting that finally we get to see the two Cleganes clash steel, even if one is pretty much a zombie / Frankenstein. It's really the final piece in the Hound's pursuit of putting his past behind him, and it's something I think most of us can agree we have all been waiting for. Number 11, Brienne Mund. Torian? I ship this hard, but it's probably unlikely to happen. However, I think Brienne will kiss Tormund just before a massive battle because we're gonna die and he's gonna be so elated he's gonna go berserk and take out countless whites and maybe a few White Walkers before perishing to the Ice Dragon in some epic arena showdown. This may all be fan fiction, I know, but it needs to happen. It could be glorious. Number 10, What Remains of Sansa Stark. So, I predict Sansa will marry the blacksmith Gendry Baratheon and return to Winterfell. To be honest, I've never really been a fan of Sansa, and quite honestly, I blame her for much of the problems that befell all the Starks and the realm. Don't at me. However, as much as I'd like to see her bratty face be impaled on an ice spike or torn apart by some frost troll, sadly I believe she's going to see the series through to the end and retire in Winterfell. Why? Because she's honestly the only Stark who's not destined for anything greater, and it's somehow fitting. Not only that, but hearkening back to Season 1, where King Robert explains to Ned that he'd really love to have their two houses join, this would fulfill that promise if she were to marry Gendry, who is, albeit a bastard, but nonetheless a Baratheon and an overall good dude. Number 9, The Brawn Factor. Let me just get this out of the way and say Bronn is the man. So, I think Bronn's going to survive. He's going to retire to a far corner of Westeros like he's always talked about. I think that Tyrion is going to ask him to be Hand of the King, but more on that later, but that he's also going to turn it down. He's paid his debts, and then some to the realm. Now, he just wants to live in peace, his wife, and read a book while watching the sunset. Let's be honest, that's the Bronn way. Number 8, Grey Worm. Honestly, Grey Worm gets the raw end of the deal quite often throughout Game of Thrones. However, in the final season, I believe that Grey Worm and the entire Unsullied army will perish trying to protect Daenerys from the Night's King. Think Battle of the Bastards, but even bigger. I just see an all-out war spanning an entire episode of just the most brutal slayings, and just as it looks like they might triumph and push back the undead hordes, they are swept up in an ocean swell of death and completely crushed, leaving the White Walkers to pound on the main chamber doors just after Daenerys has died or is dying from childbirth, and the music's gonna climax and cut to black and boom! Can you dig it? Number 7, The Time Travel Factor. While I personally don't take any stock in the Bran equals Bran the Builder theory, I do think that he will travel to before that time period and be a catalyst to many of the events. Hear me out. So, we all know there's a prequel series in the works for the Game of Thrones universe, set like 1,000 years prior to the time of the First Men, virtually untapped in the Martinverse. Given that the actor is aging in real time, we may see him travel back to that time in the final season, create the Children of the Forest or whatever, and become the first three-eyed raven. And then, going forth in the new series, we will see that same actor reprise his role, albeit in his older form, as he manipulates events even further, such as aiding his great-great-great-great-grandfather Bran in building up the Starks and Winterfell. Think Marty McFly meeting his dad and giving him direction to get his parents together, although in the case of Thrones, it's already happened. Number 6. Cersei's comeuppance. Y'all ready for this? Jaime Lannister is gonna kill Cersei. Sort of. I think during the course of the season, we will see the death of Jaime during one of the massive battles, possibly fighting side by side with Jon Snow and Tormund and Brienne and the like. It's going to be one of those moments, though, where something explodes, or we see him fall, where it's just ambiguous enough to think, well, maybe he survived. So, in a later episode down the road, we're going to see him again showing up in King's Landing all wounded to Cersei's surprise, who's going to embrace him and realize how much she cares about him and missed him and all that stuff, right? And that's when he kills her. He's going to stab her right through the stomach, right? Just rip her guts out, kill the baby that they were supposed to have together and all that. And then, just before the credits roll, it's going to pull off his face, and it's going to be Arya Stark standing there, just gloating over her. Oh, it's going to be epic. Number 5, The Army of the Dead. This one might be left field, but it's not impossible by any means. I think that many of the characters who died throughout the series are going to make cameo appearances during the final battles, as whites. While we know some of the characters like Ned Stark, who had his head lopped off and placed on a spike, was most likely destroyed when Cersei blew up the Septum and half of King's Landing, that it might be impossible for them to make a reappearance. But what about the characters who died beyond the wall, at the wall, or in between, and were just left or buried along the way? What if we see Hodor marching alongside the Night's King, clad in some ice armor, just to mess with Bran's emotions? Or Ygritte, just all tricked out with an ice bow, ready to kill her ex-lover Jon? Side note, I can't actually remember if he burned her in the funeral pyre or not, but you catch my drift, right? Number 4, Sam and the Tale of Ice and Fire. I'm pretty sure that Sam wrote the entire history of Westeros. I mean, just like how Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring opened, I imagine that this is quite possibly how the series is going to end in whole. That Sam will finish dotting the I's with his ink-soaked quill, and then close the book on that particular part of Westerosi history. He's then going to turn to his wife Gilly and their many tots and remark about what a journey it's been before the screen fades to black. Now, Game of Thrones is usually much bleaker than that, and we have been promised a bittersweet ending by the showrunners, but I just can't help feel that this would be a perfect ending to Sam's overall arc. What do you think? Number 3, The Next Night's King. Oh, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I think that Jon Snow is going to become the next Night's King. In my predictions, I believe that the White Walkers are kind of like a constant, kind of like Galactus in the Marvel Universe. They exist to keep a certain balance in this world, culling the sheep every so often when the herd gets out of control. I know that there's a theory that Bran is a time-traveling version of the Night's King, but honestly, when you take into account of the way that Snow was resurrected and his ability to command armies and do it for logic and self-sacrifice, this may be the choice that he makes to reset the meter on the apocalypse once again. Number 2, Varys. I'm just going to throw this out there. I think Daenerys is going to die during childbirth during the siege by the White Walkers, and Varys will help get Tyrion and the child to safety for one last time. Think what you want about Varys. I believe he always intends his actions to be for the good of the realm. Sure, he revels in being the guy with all the information, in a sense of power, right? But without the likes of Littlefinger and such to play against, his cunning is relatively useless now, and so his story will end with one last good deed. As for Daenerys, she didn't deserve to sit on the throne anyways, the mad queen that she is. Number 1. The Iron Throne. Here goes for the top spot in the Game of Thrones prediction list. Who will sit on the Iron Throne? Granted, at this point, with all the White Walkers and everybody dying and all that stuff like that, I mean, Westeros is pretty... I mean, who's even going to be left alive at the end, right? But, regardless of that fact, I believe that Tyrion will be the one sitting on the Iron Throne and be named king. In my humble opinion, he is the only one who truly deserves to be a ruler. He's brilliant, he's fair, he tries to avoid conflict when he can and compromise, he cares for others, and he has no real lust for power, just to do what's right. If Dany does in fact die during childbirth and Jon doesn't survive the coming winter, I also think he'll be the one left to raise the bastard child on his own without question. So, that was our list of 12 predictions we have for the final season of Game of Thrones. What did you think? Leave us a comment below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. You can find me at Twitter at Raging Antibody, or tweet the whole team at StudiosFat, hashtag Fat Ninja Studios. Again, this has been the one and only Raging Antibody, and I hope you're looking forward to the final season as much as I am.